G'day everyone, this is Boots, and I'm sure some of you have been wondering where I've been lately, and to put it bluntly, I've been busy. I've been busy playing a little game called Earthbound Zero, or Earthbound Beginnings as it's sometimes called. It started off as a simple curiosity pick. I was bored of playing almost nothing but side-scrollers on my NES emulator, so I decided to give an RPG a shot, and the Mother series in general looks interesting to me. So I played some of this game, not even really intending to dump as much of my time into it as I did. As some of you already know, I'm not really a big old-school RPG guy, especially RPGs that rely on turn-based combat. I usually like my RPGs a little bit more action-packed and fast-paced. Another thing that stops me from getting into a lot of RPGs is how many of them take place in generic fantasy worlds. I can enjoy fantasy every now and then. I like the idea of magic, knights, dragons, orcs, and shit like that, but most of the time, fantasy worlds tend to blend together, so unless we're talking about an RPG world that stands out in some unique way, I usually have a hard time getting super into them past the first couple hours. This game does have a pretty different world. It takes place in a contemporary modern setting, and offers some truly strange enemy designs. It's really more of a sci-fi RPG than a fantasy RPG. The basic gist is you're this kid that wakes up in his room to suddenly find that his home is being possessed by some evil force. Inanimate objects come to life, and throughout the town outside your house, animals and even some people have become violent. The dead rise from their graves, and in some of the other towns the adults have mysteriously disappeared. There's also this dreamlike reality called Magic Hands that you can go to that's ruled by Queen Mary, but she's suffering from constant nightmares and only knows that somehow she needs to remember some kind of melody to end them. So you spend a lot of the time looking around for all 8 pieces of the melody until you can sing the entire thing to her. You don't really get much of an explanation until the very end, so you really just start up Shit Creek without a paddle, and you're trying to figure out what's going down. But you're not just playing as some normal kid, no, your character was born with telepathic abilities, and as you progress, you unlock more powers that help you on your journey. As you explore, you'll come across all kinds of towns, and even make a few friends along the way to help you fight all the different type of monsters throughout the world. You get some cutscenes that flesh out the characters and give them a sense of personality too, and even talking to the random NPCs in the street is fun as they give you some amusing dialogue, and can be very useful in helping you figure out where to go and what to do. There's lots of cute moments, like when you go to a club and dance and sing for the audience. In one scene you have a bit of romantic tension with one of your friends, and for the most part the game doesn't take itself too seriously, and has a pretty quirky, goofy atmosphere, though it doesn't shy away from having some dramatic and even dark moments. I have to say that for an NES game, it's quite a technical achievement how large the game world feels. NES cartridges aren't known for having especially big storage space for huge-ass games, but here it really feels like you're going on a grand adventure. Granted, there's a lot of grinding that stretches out the game's length, but there's several towns to visit, each with their own dungeon and areas that are quite varied. You go to places like zoos, haunted houses, deserts, temples, caves, and you go through underwater bases, and each zone has its own mixture of enemies to keep the game from feeling too repetitive. Sometimes you even get to ride around in boats, planes, and tanks. You get a lot of different abilities, and as far as sound design is concerned, they feel pretty good to use. They sound very crunchy and impactful. The music is just incredible too. This is also a pretty hard game, probably the hardest RPG I've ever played. And like I said, this is a grind-heavy game. A lot of the difficulty is affected by how high or low level you are, though there are some parts that are tough regardless. An interesting design choice is how the game handles fast travel. Typically fast travel is just a simple shortcut to help you skip to certain parts of the game, but here everything seems to be made to try to find a middle ground between helping you reach areas faster, but keeping you immersed in the game world. When you use trains, you don't just fade to black and BAM! You're there. You have to watch the train leave the station and travel all the way to your destination while a funky tune plays in the background. There is straight up teleportation to get to towns, but it's contextualized by you having to do some kind of phase shift, which you can only do by running long and fast enough. So if you want to teleport, you need to make sure you have plenty of space, kinda like the DeLorean in the Back to the Future movies. Then you have the money mechanic. In Earthbound Beginnings, you actually have to use a credit card on an ATM to pull money out of your bank account, rather than just accumulate gold by killing enemies or finding treasure immediately. I understand that some people will find these kind of things tedious and annoying, but personally I like it a lot since it does weaken the barrier between the player and the game world. It just never really bugged me. All that being said, I won't lie, this game was an emotional roller coaster to get through. While I maintain that this is a pretty good RPG, it also has some serious flaws. Now I have 3 major problems with Earthbound Beginnings, but before that I want to talk about some minor gripes. First of all, this game does have some input delay. You can feel it as soon as you try to move around, and it's in the menus as well. This is a turn-based RPG, so it doesn't really matter as much as it would in, say, a side-scroller, for instance. But it can make movement feel imprecise, and there have been moments in my playthrough where I would accidentally use items I didn't want to use because of the input lag. Another thing is when you die in this game, it sends you back to your last save point, but for some reason it doesn't bother to restore your mana. It restores your health, but not your mana. If you've already died, you might as well top off everything while you can, and half the time when you're sent back, you're right next to an NPC that can give you back all your mana anyways, so I don't know what the point is in that. Also, you can only use, buy, and sell items one at a time, and it always kicks you out of the menus when you do any of these things. So say you want to do one of these things multiple times, you have to open the menu and get all the way back to where you were, on top of the input lag, which slows you down even more. There's an item called the Psi Stone, for instance, and as far as I know, it's the only item in the game that restores your mana, and you can't buy it in stores. The only other way to get mana is by resting in certain houses or hotels, and I must say, I've never heard of an RPG that doesn't sell you some kind of mana potion, and you are pretty reliant on spells the further into the game you get. On top of all that, the Psi Stones only restore around 20 of your mana at a time, though you can use them multiple times before they run dry. I don't know about you guys, but I would rather have it restore like 50 of my mana at once and have less charges. If you get low on mana, you have to just sit there going through the menu like 5 fucking times before you have enough to be comfortable fighting again. Now those are just the little things that annoy me. On to the big problems. So, one thing that I hate is how inconsistent a lot of debuff spells are. You learn all these different offensive spells like Confusion, Darkness, Psi Magnet, Psi Block, but most of the time they don't do jack shit. 90% of the time you try to cast them on an enemy, and all you get is, it has no effect. What's the point of giving me spells that only work when they feel like it? They don't even have the courtesy of telling you how much mana each spell costs. It really limits how many spells you can rely on, and honestly, I just found myself using normal damage and healing spells most of the time, just trying to brute force my way through encounters. And let me tell ya, if spells like Psi Block were more reliable, it would really fix a lot of encounters in this game. Which brings me to my next complaint. Some enemy attacks are just bullshit. There are enemies that can put you to sleep or give you an asthma attack, and sometimes those effects never ever wear off. So you'll basically be in the middle of a fight, and then suddenly you get hit with a status effect that prevents you from doing anything whatsoever. So you just have to sit there taking it up the ass. And I know I go by booty sometimes, but I must say, I'm not too fond of that. It's a little less annoying when you get up to 3 party members because then you can cure ailments, but sometimes you'll get so unlucky that everyone gets hit with an effect in a short time frame, or at the very least all the most useful people will get hit with it, which is basically anyone that can cast spells. There's this especially annoying spell called Beam R, which is basically a guaranteed instant kill on anyone that gets hit with it. It doesn't matter how strong you are, whether or not you have good defensive stats, or a barrier, or anything. If a member gets tapped with it, they die. Simple as that. This forces you to prioritize anything in a battle that can cast it. But God help you if you're up against several of them at once. The only way to survive BMR is by using a specific item. Yeah, I don't know, it's some kind of badge you get at the start of the game, but if you look at the item description, all it says is it protects you against lightning damage. Now let me ask, what part of lightning lets you know it would protect you from beam damage? I honestly had to look it up just to figure that out, but to be fair to the developers, it might just be incompetent translation. But there is one thing, an Achilles heel that screws you so hard, it almost ruins the entire experience, and it's really the inspiration for me wanting to make a video on this game in the first place. So, this is one of those RPGs that likes to randomly throw you into battles as you explore. Right off the bat, I don't like that. I hate RPGs that do that. And in this case, it's particularly vile. Basically, the enemy encounter rate in this game is cranked up to $11. Every individual step you take outside of the safe zones is a risk of you having to... Okay, enough! To an extent, this is useful because it means you'll be collecting more experience, and you need experience to get through the rest of the game. But at a certain point, it just becomes redundant. Eventually, you get so strong that these encounters can't threaten you at all, and their XP gains are so low they're not even worth the effort, and it never stops. There's an item that prevents these random battles, but it only works on what the game vaguely considers weak enemies, which is tied to what part of the game world you're exploring, rather than how strong you are in comparison to them. In the early game, it makes dying and having to walk to where you left off way more obnoxious than it needs to be, and it makes certain sections way harder. I swear to God, there's this one part where you have to go into a bomb factory, and it's just a maze of corridors and ladders that all look exactly the same. And guess what happens while you try to navigate this mess? Constant enemy encounters to throw you off and interrupt you. For this part, once you get the items you need, it's seriously easier and faster to just kill yourself and reset at the checkpoint than to actually try to find your way back out like it's intended. There's a lot of mazes too, so you'll just be trying to figure out where to even go and keep getting disoriented. On top of all that, eventually these encounters actually start to kick your ass too. I know that I keep going on about this one thing, but it really is a constant source of irritation throughout the game. It's like the video game equivalent of a telemarketer that keeps calling you. It doesn't matter how many times you block them or tell them to stop calling, they just keep coming. No! I don't need to renew the warranty on my car. I don't even own a car! Not only is it extremely annoying, but it has a devastating effect on your mindset. You get to a point where you don't even want to explore anymore, because half the time it just leads you to dead ends that force you into more unnecessary combat. So you just want to rush to the content that you need to do, but then unless you Google where all the important items are, you have to explore to make progress. And some of the things you're expected to do are so cryptic. Like right here. You need to return a baby canary to its mother to get one of the melody tunes, but you're supposed to just know you need to go behind this gravestone or altar or whatever to do so. This secret is especially ridiculous because usually you can't go under sprites, regardless of whether or not it makes sense in the universe. Like these trees, for instance. Realistically, I should be able to go under them since then I'd be behind them, and there are plenty of other games with this type of movement that would let me do that. But no! If I'm touching the pixels of a sprite, I can't go past it. I have to go around it. So tell me, how am I supposed to know that in this one single instance, I can go behind this sprite to find an opening to the other side? The last area of this game just destroys you. You have to climb this mountain, and basically every fight can get you killed or drain a bunch of your resources. And you have to do this a lot just to reach the top. Thankfully, you only need to climb up the top once. And if you explore enough, you can get a friendly robot that one-shots all the monsters. Let me tell you, it's one of the most satisfying gaming experiences ever just to see all those enemies die so easily after putting you through so much trouble. Even after you return to complete the melody, the game has the uncharacteristic mercy of teleporting you to the top of the mountain, rather than making you grind your way through it again. At the end, you finally enter the heart of it, and from here on I'll be spoiling the explanation of what's going on, so skip to this point if you don't want to hear it. Basically, your great-grandparents were abducted by aliens in the early 1900s. The creatures use strange powers similar to your own called psi, and your grandfather George secretly studied it while your grandmother Maria loved and raised an alien being called Gygus, though he's referred to as Gygu in this game. The aliens are enraged when they realize that George has escaped back to Earth, and fear that his knowledge of psi will be used against them, and so they send Gygus to destroy humanity before they become too powerful. Feeling conflicted about destroying the race of the people that raised him, Gygus tried to forcibly separate himself from them so he could fulfill his duty. Meanwhile, Maria has died and her soul is manifested as Queen Mary in her own dream reality of Magicant, though she's lost her memory of everything. The only thing that brings her memories back is the entire lullaby she used to sing to Gygus as she raised him. It's a beautiful song, by the way, especially if you're listening to the vocalized version on YouTube. Despite the circumstances, Maria and Gygus loved each other as mother and son, and now her soul can rest in peace. Ultimately, you confront Gygus and use the same song to remind him of his old internal conflict, and eventually chase him away as he declares he will take his revenge someday. I quite like the final boss, since you defeat it in such an unconventional but narratively appropriate way. I always appreciate it in general when games take risks like that, and even to this day, there aren't too many games that do that. Usually a game ends in some giant, super challenging boss fight that tests all of your skill, but here it's more about conveying the story through gameplay, and it's very impressive to see this kind of thing as early as 1989, when games were still getting used to the idea of having storylines at all. After you defeat Gygas, everybody lives happily ever after, leaving you with a cliffhanger, which I assume is leading up to Earthbound. Maybe I'll play that too someday, and from what I've seen, it's basically a more refined, higher budget take on what this game set up. But right now, I'm all petered out from my first Mother experience. Anyways, that's about all I had to say about this game, so like and subscribe if you enjoyed this rant, and I'll see y'all next time.